here. It is starting. Alrighty, well, hello everyone, and welcome to the live Satsang on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. So glad you are all here. And to ask questions, you simply type into the comment box. I believe it is. There's a chat box for the live stream, and you can just type in whatever whatever happens to be on your mind. Those of you who may be new to Satsang, this is it's a deeply existential and spiritual inquiry. The point of this is not to just answer the normal questions we have about life, how to make more money, how do I have better relationships, all of that, all of which is important. But Satsang is a time for taking an opportunity to ask existential questions, questions that are truly significant, that the kind that you don't ask all that often. If you're somebody who is deeply on the spiritual path, this is more common for you. If you're somebody who's just kind of dabbled in consciousness or been interested in personal development and the existential questions, the question, well, who am I really, may not come up. It doesn't come up. I mean, if you're doing personal development work, they don't ask that question. It's how do I improve my life? How do I make things better? How do I get more stuff? How do I feel more safe and secure? How do I relieve myself of conditioned patterns and blocks and the like? But nobody stops and says, all that is good, but who are you? Who's the you behind it all? Because we have all these assumptions about it. Whenever you use the word I, and we use the word I a lot, if you just stop for a moment and listen to anybody in their conversation and listen to your own conversation, you'll find that you're using the term I all the time. Not only that, but it's really they call it first person for a reason, right? You have it is the sense of I and the definition of I that defines everything else. Right? I comes first, and then there's a you, there's a them, there's a we, there's an us. But it all starts with that sense of I. But very rarely do we just stop for a moment and say, what is this I? When I say I, what am I referring to? And you'll find that almost inevitably, what is being referred to is your body, your thoughts, your beliefs, your cultural conditioning, the shape and form of your body, your gender, your race. You'll think of yourself in terms of your memories, associations. The I will be referencing all of these characteristics. And yet, if we stop for just a moment and look closely, we find that there's all these things. There's conditioned patterns, and there's a body, and there's the functioning of the body, and there's sensation, and there's memories, and there's associations. But if we stop for just a second, we realize that there's something that's watching all of those. That something that is watching all of those would have to be regarded as the closest thing to I there could be. What it is that actually hears the words, that sees a thought, the actual consciousness of us, that it doesn't even matter if you understand what you're seeing. It doesn't matter if what you're seeing is a total hallucination, right? It doesn't matter if you're having a dream or you've been hypnotized and the scene you're looking at, or you're on ayahuasca or something. It doesn't really matter what is being seen. Something is seeing it. Something is seeing it. To me, that something is the I, and that something is the most important thing to discover. Because everything else is an idea about that. All ideas, all thoughts, all feelings, all assumptions, all beliefs are all after the fact. They all come later. You have to be there first. Have you ever just wondered, who am I without a thought about me? And when you ask yourself the question, who am I, which is a very deep question and very popular in a lot of spiritual traditions, we immediately begin to think of ourselves, we picture ourselves. I would picture ourselves what you look like in a mirror or on YouTube or something, right? And then we'll look at our belief systems and all the things that we know about ourselves. But we never stop long enough to say, well, all of those ideas formed later. They're not original equipment. There's something that was there first, about which all of these ideas and concepts and belief systems and your entire self-image formed. And there's a reason it's called the self-image. It's because it's an image. It's a picture in your mind that you can look at. Let's do a little experiment right now, a little exercise. And again, at any time I invite you to type in some questions. I've got somebody monitoring the queue for me so that I know when they come up. The main focus of Satsang is to answer the questions that are on people's minds. If I don't get any questions, I'll do some exercises and I'll go on about stuff. But obviously the best way to experience Satsang is to bring up your questions, to turn your attention towards where I'm pointing you. At that sense, that very, very difficult to pinpoint sense of yourself that's there, witnessing all of the thoughts and feelings and emotions and sensation, but the entire flow of life that is there every single moment, and doing your best to see, well, what is it that's actually perceiving it? And that actually even includes the body. I mean, the number one assumption of humanity about who they are is the body. The body is kind of the anchor of the I. And in fact, science believes that consciousness, your ability, that which is perceiving these words and seeing the picture and witnessing the entire experience, is itself a function of matter. It is a function of the brain. That somehow mindless, unconscious, inert matter evolved over billions of years to a level of complexity that an emergent property, which is their term, happened that became consciousness or self-awareness. Many behaviorists believe that that's a complete illusion, that it is nothing but the function, that we are nothing more than organic robots. And these are the kind of things, these views of ourselves penetrate us very different. They affect our all of our belief systems. That view of the world as being fundamentally materialistic, that consciousness is a function of the body. Or maybe you have a religious view that there's this body and then this consciousness was stuck inside of it, took on all the characteristics of the body, all the problems of the body, and the fears of the body, afraid that it's going to die and the like. This attitude, this view of the world, this deeply held belief has created all of our political systems, our economic systems, our national systems, our systems of interaction. It's determined our relationships. It's determined our cultures. It's determined everything. It's all based on that point of view, on that belief. And I would challenge that simply on the grounds that that particular belief system isn't doing a particularly good job. I mean, it's not making a really high quality humanity that's kind to each other and peaceful and working things out and cooperative and being kind to the planet and to other animals and acknowledging. I mean, it is not a philosophy, a belief system that has produced great results. And, Christ said it very perfectly, by their fruits you shall know them. Right, good fruit. A good tree does not send forth bad fruit. A pure fountain doesn't send forth spoiled water. So clearly, there's something at work here that is creating the very opposite of what all of us want. So can you do that for the next hour or two, however long we go for? And I'll keep going as long as there are questions. If there aren't any questions, I'll run out of steam quicker. But are we willing to go there and actually ponder some of our deep assumptions? And the most fundamental assumption at all, the one that is the most influential on your life, the one that has the most large effect on your everyday experience, is the belief you hold about yourself. Who are you? Who are you really? Everybody, everyone, I'm sure everyone listening to this live stream could have had a very different life than you do. Some little difference. I mean, any one of us is capable of doing all sorts of different things in our lives well. Maybe you're a musician, but you have the capability to be a doctor. Something been a little bit different, you would have been a doctor or a lawyer or the CEO of a company. I would imagine that every one of you has an array of natural abilities that, if channeled in a particular way, there's lots of different places that you would succeed at. And isn't it interesting that, at least in the English language, we say, I am a doctor. I am a musician. And isn't it interesting how when we take on that role, that we begin to act the part. We begin to think like a doctor, walk like a doctor, talk like a doctor, want doctor things, want to live in doctor houses. Or same thing with a musician. Evan, my partner here at Master Heart Institute, is comment about, musicians he's met in their 50s that are still acting as if they're 25, right? they kind of get stuck in a particular attitude that's common amongst musicians. So we get into these roles and we kind of get stuck there. But the reality is, you could have been one tiny little difference, and that guy stuck as a musician could have been stuck as a lawyer, or stuck as a doctor, or stuck as a middle manager or CEO or something, right? It's obviously not who we are. And if I could be many different things, well, what is it? What is it that can appear and take on all these different roles? What is that? Those of you who believe in reincarnation, multiple lives, and the like, I love to point out that we're very attached to this life here and this body here, and we think, okay, well, I've had other lives before, and I'm going to have other lives after. Do you realize that this life, with everything that it's filled with, all of your loves and your passions and the things you just like really endear to, the people you love and the things you love to do and all the things that are so wonderful and all the problems too and all the other things, that given that there is a reincarnation and this body's going to pass away and you're going to get a new one, in that next body you're going to remember nothing of this one. Absolutely nothing. It's as if this entire life you've been living is a dream that's just going to go poof, go away. You're going to kind of be groggy for a minute, and you're going to wake up and and there's a new one, right? But this isn't about whether or not that's true or not, right? Whether you believe that philosophy or not. But can you see that everything is this picture we hold in our minds, and in a split second it could be gone. But something is persistent. Something remains. If there are many lives, something is going from life to life to life to life. What's that? What is that? What is that thing, whatever it might be, that goes from life to life, from form to form to form to form? What is this thing that takes forms? Is it have an essential form that, it goes to this particular kind of a form? I don't know, maybe it's an angelic body or a gargoyle or something, and then it molds itself into the next form. It's constantly morphing from one thing to another. Or is it more like water, right? That, what's the shape of water? Well, whatever the container is you put in it, Or what's the shape of a cat in a cartoon? Also, whatever the shape of the container you put it in. I don't know why cats got stuck with that job, but they did. So, in all of that, and I bring all of this up just kind of turn your attention for a minute, because in our normal way of living and our more normal everyday stuff, we don't stop and question this. We don't stop and question. Here I am. This is me. I'm GP. I'm showing up. I'm at the grocery store. I'm buying my kale and the vegan diet, my kale and collard greens, right? Or maybe you're picking out a juicy steak. I don't know. But there I am, and it don't even thinking about it. I'm just kind of acting out this part without thinking about it. Well, why don't we stop for a moment and think about it? Because like I said, it's not innocuous. Who you think you are dictates every experience you have in your life. And we don't have to go to some lofty spiritual place. I mean, that's become common knowledge. Ever since What the Bleep and The Secret came out, this idea that my self-image, that my beliefs create my reality, has made it into the popular lexicon. Everybody talks about it now. Everybody tries to practice it. Everybody's trying to think their way to a better life. So it's not a mistake that the quality of your thinking and feeling creates the quality of your life. But let's take that a step further. The self-image you're holding about, your belief system is held by the self-image and is part of your self-image. If we can question that, if we can take that down to the root, right down to the root of it, and really confront the big question, which is, who am I, independent of the thoughts, independent of the ideas that I have about myself, independent of all the beliefs that I have accumulated? Who am I before any conditioning takes place, before any programmed responses in the nervous system take place? Who am I? Who is that? And that's what I want to take up in satsang. That's the place we want to get to. And satsang is designed specifically for that purpose. I do other classes and other live events and things like that, where we're focused more on personal development, helping people through problems and working through inner difficulties and inner conflict and the like. In fact, I've even created a whole methodology called inner reconciliation to deal with that. But satsang is a very sacred place. It's a very holy place. It's a place where we forget about just improving our lives and we ask, what is the meaning of life? And I don't mean it in some kind of philosophical way. I mean personally. Why am I here? What is my real nature? Who was I before any of this other stuff happened? What was there before the conditioning? Can I actually know myself prior to the thoughts about myself? And of course the answer is yes, you can. Because you were here before the thoughts. You were here before any of the feelings. And you can experience that right now by noticing that how many thoughts, since you've been listening to this, how many thoughts have gone through your head? How long did they stay? Something watched them Something watched the gap between the thoughts, then it watched a thought arise. It watched the thought persist for a short period of time, usually a couple seconds. Thoughts don't last that long. And then you watched it subside and disappear, and then another gap, and then another thought appeared. Something consistently was watching the rising and falling of all these thoughts. Same thing with feeling. So it's not out there, right? It's not this totally disconnected, esoteric place that we have to get to. A lot of people think about awakening and enlightenment as this special place we have to get to. And in fact, it's right here. It's what you're experiencing right now. It's the awareness of the thoughts coming and going, of my words coming and going, the images on the screen come and going. You know, the image on your screen is really quite fascinating because it looks like it's just a solid picture, right? That it's static and sitting there. But the fact of the matter is the image on the screen is being refreshed 60 times a second. Those lights are being relit that make up the picture 60 times a second. The human eye can't detect anything less than 30 images a second, 30 frames a second, and the human eye detects the motion, detects the separation. Above 30, and our human eye just sees it as a streamless, solid thing. That's why movies are at 30 frames per second. Have been forever. Modern computer screens, because they have such a high resolution, do it at 60 frames a second. So it's actually double the speed. But that if you could slow the whole thing down, you'd see that there's actually blackness in between. The little dots are fading, and they're being regenerated. Your inner world's like that. Now you're still there. You're watching it. It appears as if it's seamless, but in fact it isn't. The same thing is true of your conscious awareness, of your conscious being. You are, and I want you to see it, because that consciousness is what sees the thought come and go. Right? Some thoughts come and they seem to stay because you believe them. Right? We have beliefs about ourselves, and those beliefs make certain thoughts kind of orbit around and stay. And some of these beliefs are very, very deep-seated. And a lot of them aren't really very good. A lot of people have a very, very deep sense of not being good enough, not being valuable enough, not being lovable, not being enough. Fill in any blank. But I want you to just become aware of that which is aware of the thoughts. And is that which is aware of the thoughts? Does it have a quality of not being good enough, or enough? Isn't that just a thought appearing to it? Isn't that just something being experienced? Have you got the microphone working? I forgot to hook that up earlier. I'll be able to hear you if you say something. Excuse it for 1 second while I...
Well, you'll hear it
Sorry?
You'll hear it like 20 seconds later.
No, I'll hear it directly from your mic.
Oh, right.
Right, yeah.
You'd be hearing it now.
Yeah, I'm hearing it.
Oh, you are? Okay, great.
Yeah, I can hear it. So I'm going to put the headphones on because... do we have some questions?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
Sorry about the... you probably heard some mic scratching out there and some of me talking. But we got some questions.
Very good. So right before I take the question, I just want to make sure I completed that thought. Because this is the whole point of satsang, is to bring your attention to that conscious awareness that's aware even of the thoughts. And to recognize that conscious awareness doesn't really have the attributes. It's not stuck in the thoughts. It is not trapped by those thoughts. We have beliefs about those thoughts which tend to make them sticky, but the consciousness that's aware of them isn't trapped by them any more than music is trapped by one particular song. Right? Songs come and go, and there's no limit to the number of songs that can be created. And so consciousness is exactly the same way. Thoughts come and go, feelings come and go, sensations come and go, but that conscious awareness, that is forever. All right, let's take the questions.
Okay, first question you have, it says, I'm struggling with the fact that there's this little voice that's my ego, and then that different feeling of more source. How do you stop feeling a bit schizo? Though, is this a normal feeling?
Very, very interesting. Well, of course it's normal because you're experiencing it, right? Whatever we're experiencing is what we're experiencing. That is normal. And yes, there's a sense of being connected to source, right? And that's actually kind of a term from law of attraction, the whole source energy thing, which is good. It's a good term. But what I want to have happen for you is the sense of I become the source. We see ourselves here, then we have an ego here, and then we have source energy over here. And somehow we're in the midst of this conflict between the whole thing. Source energy and I, or you, are the same thing. You are the source energy. This is what is very difficult to grasp. This is why it isn't grasped very much in the law of attraction, because it's not two. You are. Everything starts at consciousness. There's nothing prior to consciousness. There's not some other consciousness that's aware of your consciousness. Right? The consciousness you're experiencing is the consciousness. Now, the ego is simply a thought. The ego is that sense of identity, that sense of, that I mentioned, the self-image that I mentioned in the beginning, in the opening. That sense of self-image, when it is believed, that really is me, you are the consciousness, you have all the power. You invest this particular thought with belief, and now it starts to function within your energy system and nervous system and body as if it were a real entity. Now we wake up a little bit to see that the ego doesn't necessarily have my best interests at heart, at least from the point of view of my new understanding and desire to awaken. It actually does, but it's only worried about safety and defense. And now it seems like it's a problem. It's schizophrenic until you recognize that you are the one indivisible, irreducible consciousness that is aware of all the thoughts and feelings and experiences going on in the body that we identify as the ego. When we see that the ego is just a thought and not a real entity, it begins to dissolve. And as it begins to dissolve, the nervous system itself begins to respond increasingly just to the pure consciousness, to the pure awareness. And you lose interest in the ego. I mean, the ego is just a thought. It's a thought that's been believed, right? And you can drop that thought at any time that you want. And as you become more matured and you blossom more in this, you recognize that what actually, the ego is nothing but a creation of the nervous system, a story explaining the various activities of the nervous system. And the activities of the nervous system were one of creating behaviors and attitudes and reactions to the environment to keep it safe. That's it. That's the whole story. From the moment you're born, your nervous system, without any any need for your help, develops a very deep and complex set of behaviors to properly interact with whatever environment it was born into to guarantee that it survived. That means some behaviors which are very natural to you, which are very, very much who you are, very much characteristic of this individual manifestation, aren't allowed. The tribe doesn't allow them, or they're diminished, or they're not appreciated. And when you're little like that, and you express yourself, and you get back a diminishment or some kind of pain, it's very threatening because you're dependent upon your tribe to survive. So those behaviors, even though they're natural, become pushed to the basement. They're not allowed. They can't be there because they're dangerous, right? So you end up, your natural proclivities, your natural gifts, end up becoming dangerous to you, and that's the essential. That's the fall, basically. That's the essential trauma that we all suffer. Over time, the sense of self develops itself, right? Starting right around 2 to 7 years old, it's really beginning to develop a sense of me. A story begins to form, which is just an explanation of it. I don't have time to go into all of the details about how it works, but basically, that your nervous system, the brain, the whole thing, it's one of the functions of it is to invent stories and believe them, because it doesn't like not knowing. And the number one story it created was the story of I, the story of me, and it got installed as a truth. And so the nervous system is now revolving around that belief, which we now call the ego. By the way, the word ego is simply the Greek word for I, right? It's gotten a lot of meaning from Freud, but basically it's just the word for I, the sense of I. And so your nervous system is in this position of certain behaviors which it's invested in for keeping it safe in the environment and getting what it needs, and develops a sense of I that kind of holds the whole thing together. So now we've got this very stable little system. Well, something like awakening comes along, and you get introduced to the idea that, wait a minute, maybe that isn't me. And the first blush of that happens. Even a deep insight, a huge insight. People suddenly, they see God, they feel one with the universe. But then they're really surprised when a couple days later they're yelling at their partner or their kids or something, or flipping somebody off in the car. It's because that sense of self is still very active in the nervous system. It just takes, so it's not schizophrenia. You're actually not at all schizo. You're very much in the right position. You're in the position of the aware observer. Now it just takes a little maturing, a little understanding of the nature of the entire mechanism of human existence, of the human manifestation. The entire instrument that is available for consciousness. And then that sense of ego, that sense of a separate self as being an entity, little by little just begins to be expunged from the entire system. And then even the nervous system itself, the whole energy system, then begins to reorganize itself around the true I, around consciousness. And so the liberation that is awakening, a consciousness awakening to its own nature, is also the liberation of the human being, of the human instrument, of the capacity for expression, of the individuality. So the vehicle of expression gets liberated as well. I always like to use the example of the piano. The piano gets tuned, so now the piano plays really well. And you've liberated the pianist, who no longer feels constrained by the funky piano it had to play, but now can actually be the master again because the piano itself has been liberated. That's the human mechanism, the human being. You are not the human instrument. You are not the body. You are not the human mind or the emotions. You are the consciousness behind them. But when they are liberated from the false sense of self, they become the perfect instrument through which consciousness expresses itself. And that's when you experience the best that particular form can possibly produce, and that form being what you know as you. But you also realize that you are beyond that form. And ultimately you see that all forms belong to you, the one conscious awareness of all things. So I hope that answered your question. If so, just great. If not, please, you can do a follow-up in there. We're monitoring it. So I hope that answers your question. We have another one coming up.
Yeah, you have several now. So, okay. Since I started the inquiry, I feel I live in limbo. Can't go back to an unconscious life, but still not, quote, awaken. It's very hard. I feel I am living in a dream. What can one do in these kind of times? There's a part 2. Do you want to take that much now or read the rest of it?
Is it related to the first part? Or is it really a separate question?
I'll read it. Also, I still
Okay.
can't understand the fact that life is in my concision and simultaneously in all other people too. It's a paradox.
Okay, let me take that one first. I'm sitting here in Astoria, New York, and I don't know where you're sitting at. You may be in London, you could be in San Francisco, you could be next door, right? Is the space I'm sitting in any different than the space you're sitting in? Is space divisible? Does space have a location? The content of space clearly does. I'm in a particular apartment, right? And so it seems as though this space is contained by the apartment. But if we knock this building down, would the space be any different? We think of consciousness, this pure awareness, as being contained within the body. And therefore we think that there's your consciousness and my consciousness and his consciousness. And in fact, early on, back, 200-300 years ago, when science was beginning to bloom and doctors started cutting open dead people's body, they were looking for the soul. They were looking for consciousness. We're convinced that somewhere inside there was some kind of subtle material that was consciousness. But spirit is like the wind, right? Consciousness is not an object. It is irreducible. It is indivisible. It is not a thing, which is why we don't perceive it. That consciousness is who you are. So you are not a thing. That's why the mind can't know you. That's why you can't use the mind for self-discovery. Right? You can use it, but the ultimate self-discovery is outside of mind. Because the mind, brilliant tool, but all it can do is manipulate symbols. It has to have objects. Mind must describe this in terms of this. Right? Buddha called it dependent origination. You can't have tall without short. You can't have night without day. The whole yin-yang symbol. The opposites have to arise together, or you don't have any form. Well, you don't have an opposite. Consciousness, that which is aware of itself, but non-phenomenally. It's not aware of itself as a thing. Now, when you really look at that, and just look at your own experience, see if you can find a boundary to consciousness. You can find a boundary to the content of it. And when I think of myself as a body, then I will think of consciousness, the consciousness which is identified with the body, thinks of itself as contained within the body. But notice how everything that's ever happened to you, everything that's ever come to you, consciousness has been more than capable of receiving it. We look at the world through our attention, which is like looking at the world with a flashlight. And we think the only thing that the flashlight sees is the only thing there is. And yet behind the flashlight, orders of magnitude larger, is an awareness of that attention, and then whatever else the flashlight gets pointed at is immediately available to consciousness. Matter of fact, it's always available to consciousness. It's just the attention gets limited. So you can look for yourself to see if you can find any boundary to consciousness. You say, well, it's bounded here by the body, and then you realize that this boundary is being perceived in consciousness. See, consciousness, who you really are, is not bound. It's spaceless and timeless. It is not infinite and immortal. It is outside of space and time. Space and time are irrelevant to it. Space is a measurement. Space is you only have space if you have objects. Space doesn't, it was Einstein who said space doesn't exist independently of the objects that contain it. Same thing with time. Only instead of objects, it's events. And so, but just look, your awareness is absolutely still. What is being perceived is changing constantly, but the perceiving itself is always the same. That sense of consciousness, like space, means it's the same consciousness everywhere. And so the consciousness that is looking out of these eyes and seeing the camera that's looking back at me is exactly the same consciousness that's looking at the screen and seeing my picture. It's the same consciousness. The sense of a personal self that is identified with the body has a hard time grasping that, because it's identified with the body. I am this, you are that. That's the nature of mind. But notice all of that, every single thought you have, every single experience happens within consciousness. Everything happens to it, in it, through it. So just explore that for yourself, right? But explore it experientially. Don't try to think your way to it, because you won't be able to do it. But the space in Toledo right now is exactly the same as the space in New York. And the consciousness in Toledo is exactly the same as the consciousness in New York. It is not individualized. It is the actual substance of existence itself. Consciousness is the substance of the universe, not matter. There is no matter. That's a picture in the mind. That's an idea that was invented because it was believed that what I was perceiving was separate from myself. And it's not true. There is nothing separate from what you perceive. You have to believe that there is, because there's nothing in your perception that tells you that. Look closely, and you cannot step outside of perception and validate the existence of something independent of perception. And yet we believe with all our hearts that it's there. We believe it, we're convinced of it, it must be there, although nobody has ever experienced it. All we've ever experienced is perception. Kind of went off on a tangent there. But anyway, I hope that covers it. Consciousness is universal. There's only one, the great I am. The one intelligence, the one consciousness, the one being. We all share the same being. Now, the first question again, please.
Okay, let me find it here.
So glad to have all these questions, by the way.
Since I started the inquiry, I feel I live in a limbo. Can't go back to an unconscious life, but still not awaken. It's very hard. I feel I am living in a dream. What can one do in these kind of times?
All right. First thing you can do is smile, right? and put a little chuckle on your face. It is perfectly natural. When we begin to awaken, what happens is that, remember, your whole energy system, for how many years you thought you were this person. You thought you were this body, mind, form, walking around with all these problems and the stuff that happened, these traumas, and you thought you were that, right? So your whole nervous system has stabilized around that. It knows how to act in the world, right? If something happens, it responds as that person. It's got all the behaviors for that person. Well, all of a sudden, this thing called awakening comes in and says, oh, by the way, you're not that person. Yes, it's destabilizing, right? So put your attention, right? It's only the mind that says it's hard. Consciousness doesn't say it's hard. It's just a thought. The sense of self, because now it's feeling destabilized, it's feeling threatened, saying, oh, this is really hard, right? I mean, it's like, your mind tells you to do something, and then when you do it, it says, well, that was stupid. Why'd you do that? I mean, it's the same mind, right? It's just, remember, the whole sense of self, the false sense of identity, it's only false. We see it now false from an awakened point of view. We believed it to be true. It was implemented as truth within the system. Excuse me. And the reason it does that It's part of the number one mandate of the entire energy system is safety, survival. Number two is freedom, right? But the number one is survival. So what happens when you begin to question the validity of that sense of self, it's going to feel as if your survival is threatened because the nervous system has attached to that. It's been functioning on behalf of this person. Just look really close and see if you can find this person. Separate from the thoughts, the feelings, the ideas, the concepts, all the stuff that you've identified, can you actually find a real person there? This is the way you can take the inquiry and begin to dismantle it, right? Because there really isn't anybody there. There is only the functioning of the nervous system. And as the belief in the person begins to dissolve, the nervous system, which will be kind of freaked out at first, will simply adjust, because that's what it does, right? It is a perfectly adaptable machine. As that begins to dissolve and the sense of I returns back home to the reality of it, your energy system will begin to move and start acting like the true I. It'll start implementing the true I, which means less fear, more compassion, more intimacy, more tenderness, more genuineness, more authenticity, and a feeling of belonging, a feeling of love, because the limited, constricted view of you is dissolving. So it's okay if it's uncomfortable at first, right? Don't throw a story on top of it. Say, oh, this is really hard and I can't get through life. You are getting through life, obviously. You're totally functional, right? It's just uncomfortable right now. So don't let the mind turn this into a major event. I mean, it is a major event, but don't let it turn into like this traumatic thing, right? Yeah, it's going to be awkward, right? But remember when you went through puberty? That was awkward, most of our teenage years, really awkward, right? I mean, it's nothing new. It's nothing new. Only this time, this transition is from mortality to immortality, from the false sense of self to the true sense of self, which will never, ever leave you. So I hope that answered that question. Let me get on to the next one. Thank you all for these questions. They're good too. Really good.
Okay. My problem is that self-inquiry and experiencing non-duality makes me pretty non-active. After spending a lot of time with it, I stopped leaving my flat, spending time with my friends. I felt pretty natural about it, but my friends started to worry. What's your take on that?
Yes, they are going to worry. You'll find a sangha. I mean, you'll find a group of people who are on the same path. If you've taken any of my courses, even one of my $7 meditations, you can be part of the graduate group we have on Facebook, which is like people that are basically in the same boat. Yes, of course, you're content with it, but your family and your friends are like. Remember, every system, whether it be your own inner nervous system or the system of a family, the system of peer groups, even the systems of communities and nations, right, depend on everybody being the way they're supposed to be. They stabilize, right? So you were a particular kind of character, a particular personality, and you fit in and things worked. And everything's wonderful and stable unless something changes. You changed. Something woke up. There's a whole new energy that's flowing into this system of friends. And it's uncomfortable for them. Right? They don't know what's happening to you. They don't know what awakening is. And frankly, if you began to tell them, they may look at you cross-eyed. They may think you're absolutely crazy. Right? But again, it's okay. If you feel like hanging out with them and you still enjoy their company and it's fun, do it. There's plenty of people I hang around with, and believe me, the conversation is not at all like this, right? And I still enjoy their company. I don't have to be talking about this all the time. Most of the people who are close to me are in the same boat. We are really in love with non-dual inquiry. And that's what I would just say to do. I mean, if let's say you're hanging out with all your friends and suddenly, I don't know if you're male or female, you meet the love of your life, you know, hot as a firecracker, totally absorbed. Are your friends going to become less important? Are you going to be spending more attention to the new lover? Now, a new lover, your friends will go, oh, okay, right, okay, it's new lover. I get it. You get it. That's a little bit more within what they're used to. It's a little bit acceptable, but they're still going to be, hey, man, we never get to see you again, right? And right, they're not. And of course, if you ended up getting married or living together, everything changes. The entire dynamic changes. Well, you've just fallen in love with yourself. You've fallen in love with the truth of being. You've fallen in love with the inquiry into the reality of who you are. And what better thing could you fall in love with? Some of the people you are with, depending on what they're interested in, what you guys talked about before, may actually be really curious about what's going on with you. They may want to know. And tell them. Tell them exactly what you're discovering. Point out the things that you're looking at. And most importantly, share the effect that it's having on you. Don't make it intellectual. Are you happier? Or at least more engaged? Are you more excited about this? Does your life have some energy about it? Not this, right? Obviously, a lot of the stuff you normally used to occupy your time outside of yourself isn't as interesting, but this is. I have that experience with people that I work with, become students all the time. It's like, God, I don't want to do anything but this. I go, well, good. You're in love. Of course. What else do you think about but your beloved when you're in love? You're going to function, right? Don't worry. You're not going to become dysfunctional. You're not going to all of a sudden be sitting in the corner drooling, right? And somebody has to come in and take care of you. If you have a job, you can go to your job. You do your job. It'll integrate. This inquiry will integrate into everything. If you have some friends you want to hang out, go hang out with them. Don't try to. This isn't a lifestyle. This is a connection to the very energy of life itself. And it, all by itself, will just permeate and colonize every aspect of your life. And those that are destined to become even deeper friends will. Those that are just no longer relevant will just kind of fade out of your life. That's the way it is. That's the way it always is at every stage of growth. So I hope that kind of takes the pressure off. A lot of people feel a lot of pressure when suddenly they're getting into this and their life is changing and you don't feel like you're there yet, right? You're kind of on the journey. Well, the most important thing to recognize is that there's a beautiful quote from Rumi, who said, "The power that brought me here must bring me home." We don't choose the spiritual journey. It chooses us. Something inside of you welled up. Something inside of you drew your attention to this. Something inside of you responded with love and interest and maybe even passion about it. You didn't choose this stuff. You didn't make it up. You didn't say, I think I'm going to become a spiritual seeker now. It happened to you. The power that brought you here will bring you the rest of the way. I guarantee it. Just let your attention sink back into that. Surrender to this force of truth that is flowing in and as your life. Right? You made up your mind that you wanted the truth. The moment that happened, your life was no longer your own. Your life belonged to truth. And every event in your life is now coming from truth to bring you closer and closer to truth. And what the truth is who you really are. Truth is the true I. So, thank you for that. Beautiful.
Okay, so what exactly is belief? In other words, what do you mean by believing your thoughts? Who is doing the believing? Are there mechanisms that exist then between the ego, thoughts, and consciousness?
Yeah, belief is a very subtle energy, and I'll do my best to try to bridge this, because especially if you've had experience with non-dual inquiry, and maybe even seen my video, there is no person. Who is it that's believing? And it isn't easy to put into words, but I'll do my best, knowing perfectly well I'm about to fail. There's an energy of belief that simply holds something to be true. That sense of this is true acts kind of like a magnet. I mean, it's the essence of, what they like to call the law of attraction. When I believe something to be true, thoughts that are like it, feelings that are like it, sensations that are like it begin to collect around it. Okay? So this belief forms as a pattern within the nervous system. We then project on it the sense of self, and we come up with a believer. The reality is there's a belief, but there's no believer. Or you could say the belief and the believer are one. You could say the dreamer is the dream. Is the dream. A friend of mine wrote some lyrics to some music of mine, and she is the most beautiful line. She said, "If it's true that it's all a dream, who wakes up when it ends?" If you look at it from the Hindu tradition, the dreamer is God. The one being is dreaming himself, herself. It is the Brahma that is dreaming up a universe to experience itself as many. Now, I don't want to go into all of that because I don't want to lay a bunch of thoughts on it. Belief forms within the system as an attachment to a certain set of things, a certain set of patterns of behavior, right? Remember, when you're growing up as a child, very definite patterns of behavior get put into place because those are the ones that are most successful at dealing with your environment and getting your needs met. It's very, very fundamental. Now, there's nobody there in terms of a person or character or entity that is creating that is choosing this or that behavior. It's happening very organically, the result of nature itself. Later on top of all of these patterns of activity, we project the sense of a person. It's consciousness that is projecting that sense. It's the flashlight. Boom, I'm looking at this. For some reason, it thinks this is all I have. Now, if we really probe it to the depths, we see that it thinks is itself just a thought. And you see that pure awareness, even that, the idea of a belief and a believer, is appearing in front of pure awareness, which does not have a belief, which does not have an attachment, which is not dreaming. So the dreamer, the guy in the dream and the dream are the same. And the entire thing is happening on the screen of pure awareness. It's okay for our language to refer to believing. I use the term belief because it shows a more subtle level of energy, because when I believe something, it literally begins to transform perception. So that belief gets substantiated as true. The nervous system filters out any whatever contradicts it and amplifies what confirms it. It's how we form perceptions. But we can probe that even more deeply to see that even that is being perceived by pure, absolute awareness. So the sense of do I dare go here? Okay. The firstborn of the pure, self-aware beingness, being of awareness, the firstborn is the sense I am. Prior to that, there's not even the sense of I am. You just are the I am. The sense of I am emerges. That sense, with the sense of I am, the universe is created. Everything is created in that instance. You can call that the Big Bang, or you could call that the 7 days of creation. Doesn't really matter. It is the I, when it emerges as the first manifestation of the totally unmanifest. That I has the capability of identifying with what it sees. If you really look at that identification, you can see what its essence is love. It's simply loving what it is that it is experiencing. But the entire time, the entire thing is happening on the perfect, undisturbed screen of pure awareness. And this is not hard to get to. Do it right now. Just look. Is not everything I've said, every idea you've had, every impulse, every intuition, everything being perceived by something which is itself completely imperceivable? The ultimate subject cannot be anybody's object. And everything, including the subtlest sense of I, even the subtlest space, is perceived. So the perceiver is imperceivable, and yet that is where you are sitting right now. That is who's looking at this screen and hearing this voice. There's only a thought that says that pure awareness is an individual consciousness, it's this form, it's going through these things, it has beliefs. But that's just all appearing, that's just the thoughts going on. None of that's for real. The awareness remains pure awareness, untouched, uninfluenced. A galaxy can explode, space is completely unaffected. The only reason this whole process is difficult is because who you really are, that pure awareness, is not an object. It cannot be perceived. It is, you know it because you are it. You are aware of being aware, which is awareness aware of itself. Do you think, did I cover that, Evan?
I think so, but they can always comment and let us know if not. So, can consciousness see itself is the next question.
No. If in order to see something, you have to have an object. Consciousness is not an object. Consciousness is what is seeing. Now, I want to caveat on that, because when you go deeper into this, at first there's this beautiful and essential split between the perceiver and the perceived. And it's a very powerful inquiry to recognize that whatever I am perceiving can't be me. This is what is known in Hinduism as neti neti. It's the 4 possibilities in Buddhism. Neither this nor that nor both nor neither. Whatever I'm perceiving, by definition, can't be me. Because if I can perceive it, right, I must be standing somewhere else to perceiving it. So perceiving as a subject-object relationship requires 2. I as the perceiver, therefore, right, if I can perceive it, it cannot be me, which means my thoughts, my feelings, my body, all of it, I can now push aside. I can dissolve that. And all the knowledge and ideas and assumptions that have grown out of that identification with what I am actually perceiving can also fall away, which is really all of human knowledge. Which leaves now the big question, can the perceiver itself be perceived? The answer is no, it can't. Because by definition, if it was perceived, it would be an object, and you would be whatever's perceiving it. And this is why we can't grasp it. You cannot form a self-image of who you really are, because you're not a thing. You hear people say, well, you're really nothing, right? You're not a thing. Of course you're something. You're here, you're listening, you're cognizant of everything, you're pure awareness. you're definitely something, right? But it's what you are is not a thing. It is awareness without a form. It's consciousness that is not an attribute of something else. It is simply consciousness. And so everything that is observed, then you see, is not you. Well, what do we do then? Okay, it's not me. I'm just this pure awareness. Right? Well, then what the hell's all of this? What is all of this? Because obviously I'm experiencing things. I mean, I know I exist and I know I'm experiencing. I mean, I know what I'm experiencing. I may be having a hallucination. I may be dreaming. I may be on ayahuasca. But I'm experiencing. It's undeniable. What am I experiencing? And this is when the inquiry, once it has established itself as the pure consciousness, turns around. In Tozan's ranks or in Buddhism, they call this the coming down from the mountain. Right? Now I turn around and what I completely dismissed before, completely saw that I was not that. I now have to look closely at it and say, what is it? Where did it come from? What is that made of? And as I look closer and closer, and I dismantle this idea of something existing separate from my perception of it, I realize that it is made of me. That I am literally seeing myself in myself. And that everything appears in consciousness, to consciousness, and, here's the big one, is made of consciousness. So at that point, the separation, the wisdom of separation now turns around and embraces in love everything that it sees as itself. That's the ultimate attainment. That's the ultimate awakening. Now, it's no longer. And in that, you embrace yourself as the ordinary human being. Just a simple human being. And Buddha's words become quite meaningful when he said, the ordinary human being is the Buddha. So, but it's part of the process we're going through. First we separate, the wisdom of separation, the double-edged sword of truth, which is discriminating until we have eliminated from our sense of ourself everything that doesn't belong there, and we are left with just the pure, unadorned, indescribable, ineffable awareness. And then we can turn around and go, this entire universe is appearing to me. Of what is it made? And we find that it's made of you, the very same, the one substance. And now consciousness is no longer localized. But consciousness is all there is. And the idea that the universe is made of matter is replaced with consciousness as the very substance of everything. Have some more questions?
Okay. If life is a dream, why is this reality frame so consistent? For example, when you fall asleep, consciousness takes different forms, yet when we wake to our waking everyday life, everything is the same.
Well, it's not the same, really. I mean, because things are constantly changing. But I get the point. Well, here's the dilemma we'd all be under. Remember, what we're experiencing in the consciousness, the waking state, the dream state, and then the content-free state. I mean, every night you experience a complete absence of content, right? Even an absence of the sense of I. You are pure awareness every single night. You don't remember it, of course, because there's nothing to remember. Right? There's no content. There's nothing to measure time. But we wake up and go, boy, I really slept well. I mean, that's really it. The real rest we experience in sleep is that consciousness completely disposes for a moment of all content. Right? Now, all three of those are appearing on the screen of consciousness. And they just show different aspects. The dream state is a sense, when you're in it, it's a sense of reality. It is the reality. You're in the dream. You don't say, you don't question it, right? It's what you're experiencing. And then in the waking dream, we believe it to be more substantial than this. If you look really closely, the only difference between the night dream and the waking dream is continuity. If every night you went to sleep and started to dream, and your dream picked up at exactly the place it left off, you would not be able to tell which was which. You'd have two waking states. So what we call the waking state is really a misnomer. It's not awake. It's not awake at all. It is simply the same kind of dream content, only it has a narrative going on. It's got a thread going on. That's the only difference. Look at it closely. Don't take my word for it. Just really examine it. Right? You can see that that's it. That's the only difference. From the point of view of the experiencing itself, the quality of the experience, the character of experiencing is completely the same, whether you're dreaming, whether you are waking, or whether you are in a completely contentless state. The experiencing is identical. What you are experiencing shifts, changes. And that the nature of it changing is one of the hints that's been laid, that's been given to us, or given to itself, as to that, oh, this really isn't the reality. I am the reality. Remember, reality is not something you experience. Reality is what you are. It is the one experiencing. And like I said, the waking dream, the sleeping dream, the dreamless sleep, or even some kind of hallucination or drug-induced state, are all experienced in exactly the same way, in exactly the same place. That place is the reality. As that begins to sink in, fear begins to disappear. And the investment in particular things happening within the dream disappears. You kind of let the dream unfold itself. It's quite all right? Because you're no longer attached. You're no longer tied to it. It's amusing. It's entertaining. You know, sometimes like any good entertainment, it could be a drama, it could be a tragedy, right? Everybody dead at the end, like like Shakespeare, right? Or it could be a romantic comedy, right, where everybody's happy at the end, except the one guy who gets jilted because he always has to. There has to be a conflict, doesn't there, in any kind of drama for it to be interesting, right? But that's exactly the way you see it. Yeah, it can be really serious. It can be really light. But you just recognize that you are the one aware of it. And it is going to come and go, and you are not, ever. You're birthless, deathless, spaceless, timeless. Put your attention on that which is having the experience itself, the actual experiencer, and you will find your immortality. It's just sitting there. It's obvious to itself. This is great. Very good questions. Very good questions. I'm so delighted.
Okay. How can the sense of I am even emerge? How does pure awareness perceive?
Whoa. You guys are really pushing me to the limit here, aren't you? The sense of I am emerges. It is the nature of awareness itself. A way I try to use as a metaphor, and it's an incomplete metaphor, so please don't take it as absolute. Imagine a perfect, infinite, indivisible mind. It's everywhere. It's the only thing there is. It's infinite. There's nothing else. There's no form, no shape. It is simply pure self-awareness, an infinite mind. Well, the nature of the mind is to ponder. And what else is there for it to ponder but the only thing that actually exists, which is itself? That pondering produces a self-image that we could call the I am, the sense of I am, or maybe the thought of I am. I don't like to use that word because it has very employing it in very different ways. But that kind of gives you an inkling. We want to think of awareness as just this blankness, right? Awareness itself, as itself, it's like white light. Pure white light can't be seen. It's totally invisible. And yet if you pass it through a prism, boom, the entire universe becomes visible. Just an infinite shading of color becomes available to us. Yet it's all just that light. The light itself, while it in and of itself is completely without attributes, possesses in it the potential for an infinite number of attributes. That one awareness is the source and the substance and the light of all knowing, all art, music, relationships, interaction, ideas, architecture, everything. Everything is this pure light of consciousness that has simply been filtered through the sense of I am. The sense of I am emerges, and with it, a universe. Don't mistake our small sense of I am as a person to be the sense of I am, which is the self-awareness of awareness. And you can, again, we can go there directly ourselves. Are you not aware? I ask you, you're aware, you're going to say yes, right? Now there was a thought when I said, are you aware? And there was another thought when you answered yes. In between, where did you look? There's no object you referred to. You went to this place that's impossible to describe, and yet undeniable. And now we can sit here and we can talk about that forever. We can draw pictures of it. There's just no end to the art, the renderings we can make of this. Right? There is no end to its expression. Again, using the example of music. Music is the potential for all music. But can you fathom music without a song? And isn't all of music manifest in a single song? And yet, is music itself divided up into songs? Even so, pure awareness manifests itself as conscious awareness, as the sense I am. It is the firstborn of awareness. We realize that awareness is the potential for all. It is the mother of all objects. But the objects don't exist independent from it. It is simply awareness pondering itself. Awareness aware of itself. And in that awareness is a universe. Universes upon universes. Boy, you are I mean, this is extremely subtle. And I want to bring your attention back to your direct experience of being the awareness. So you get so sensitive to the sense of I, looking outward and beginning to identify with what it's seeing. And I want to keep bringing that back to that sense of I that is the witness of what it's seeing. But even that sense of I has got some quality to it. It's got some interest in it. And that quality and interest is being perceived by something else. Something that is ineffable, inscrutable. It's beyond all possibility of description. And yet you can't deny it because you're it. You're experiencing it all the time. It is what is. Hearing my words and seeing this picture. It's where the buck stops. It's where everything registers. So even that subtle sense of I is being observed by that which is absolutely unobservable. And yet you know it. You know it intimately. That sense is the I. That is what the word I. That's what the word I really refers to. And in religious terms, they call that God. the one I am, prior to I am. That was there before the world was. Do we have some more?
No.
That was it?
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Very cool.
For those of you who typed thank yous and such, GP will actually see those when it's over. So
Yeah, I'll get to look at those after. Yeah. Right now I have Evan do that so I can focus on this. And I actually look at the camera instead of the screen, so it's not so like you see me looking like this all the time. Well, wow. Okay. Well, just on a final note before we let this go, I hope, in addition to the precision of the inquiry we're trying to make here, that you grasp the spirit of this, right? You know, people like to say I'm spiritual but not religious, and and actually even criticize religion for good reason. Religion has become very institutionalized. It's become wrapped up with greed and governments and all that sort of stuff, and has served the interest of empire more than the interest of people. But if you go to the essence of the religious experience, you find a religious sentiment. And in a lot of non-dual teaching, you'll see that's missing. It's too much on the mind, too much on the two-edged sword, and not enough about on the heart of it. To me, I see it as a twofold path. One I call the wisdom, or the yoga of wisdom, and the yoga of allowing, that yoga of pure compassion, of heart presence. Because if it doesn't touch our heart, our lives aren't really touched. To explore who you really are is to feel a sense of, first of relief, then of peace, and then of happiness. And enlightenment is happiness. In Sanskrit, they refer to Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss. To be is to know. So the self-awareness is being and knowing are the same thing. But so is joy. The bliss, and I'm not talking about an ecstatic experience. I'm talking about peace. I'm talking about contentment, a sense that everything is okay right now. Now that contradicts our nervous systems and the false sense of self, which is never content. It's always looking for something else. That's its nature, because it isn't the real thing. So it's going to have to always look for something else. But you are the real thing. So that you can know whenever you have an impulse if something is missing, that it's not coming from you. It is coming from the false sense of self. And all you have to do is turn your attention towards it. Don't try to get rid of it. Don't try to push it away. Don't try to fight with it. Recognize it for what it is. And then just turn your heart towards your inner being, that sense of desiring something inside, and just fill it with compassion. Fill it with love. The way if a friend of yours was really grieving over something or really needed something, you wouldn't just push him away. You'd be with him. You'd do everything you could to help them, to make them feel comforted. Take that kind of attitude towards your inner inquiry, and it will make all the difference in the world. And you'll find that the one making the inquiry and the one giving the love is in fact the very one that you've been seeking. There's a beautiful quote from St. Francis of Assisi, which many of you have heard because I say it all the time. He said, "That which you are looking for is where you are looking from." And there's another quote, I'm not sure who it's from a medieval mystic monk, Christian tradition, who said, "Thou art the love with which I love thee." You'll find that which you are seeking and you, the seeker, are actually one. One in the heart. And that's where it's truly satisfying. So, thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. And I will be doing another satsang, a private satsang. This one I do actually do charge for. I get you on video and we can interact if you like, or we can talk verbally. And that's going to be in 2 days on Tuesday. And I think you can sign up for that if you just go to gpwalsh.com/satsang. And as always, if you want to participate but you really don't have the money for it, it's only $25. Just let us know. We usually can fit people in. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for the quality of the questions. Thank you for the awakening that's occurring universally, that such a subject could even be discussed, and there's quite a few people here, is like totally amazing to me. It shows that there is a huge awakening going on across the entire planet, that is going to transform all of us and the planet as well. It really is the answer to all of our questions and the remedy to human suffering. So thank you for being here. I love you all. Namaste.